Today we're learning about the properties of different quadrilaterals, and we're going to learn about, first of all, what a quadrilateral is. A quadrilateral has four sides, a polygon with four sides. And any quadrilateral can be split into two triangles. So if you add the 180 plus 180, since there's two triangles in any quadrilateral, you'll get a sum of 360. So the four angles in any quadrilateral are going to add up to equal 360 degrees. So all four of those will add up to equal 360 degrees. Okay. There are two main types of types of quadrilaterals. Trapezoids and parallelograms are the two main types because with trapezoids you have one pair of parallel sides, and we can see that in all three of these examples. You'll also see the notation for parallel. This notation is telling you that side AC is parallel to side BD. So it's important that you recognize this notation. So when we have two vertical lines, that represents parallel. So here we have line segment AC parallel to line segment BD. So you need to recognize the parallel symbol because I'll use it a lot, just like this is the perpendicular symbol. You'll need to know what those mean or you won't be able to read notation. All right, so we can tell here in these pictures that AC is parallel to BD. In this one, AC is parallel to BD. That's not congruent. That means they're parallel. They never intersect. And here, AC is parallel to BD. Those are three completely different looking trapezoids, but the definition of a trapezoid is that it's a quadrilateral, which means there's four sides, and that one pair of opposite sides is parallel to one another. When we have two pairs of parallel sides, that's when you have a parallelogram. So the definition of a parallelogram is a quadrilateral, so a four-sided figure, four-sided polygon, whose opposite sides are parallel to each other. Now, parallelograms also have some other features. Not only are the opposite sides parallel, when it comes to all of our types of parallelograms, including the parallelograms themselves, we're going to know some information about the sides and the angles. First, we'll know about the parallel characteristics. We know that opposite sides are parallel. Then we're also going to know that opposite sides are congruent and opposite angles are congruent, as we see in this picture. Now, there are three main types of parallelograms that we have to know about. There are two main types of parallelograms, a rhombus and a rectangle. A rhombus has all the characteristics of a parallelogram, so you know that opposite sides are parallel, opposite sides are parallel, and opposite angles are congruent. In addition, all the sides are congruent. So basically, it looks like a parallelogram that's been smushed in. And what makes it smushed in is the fact that all the sides are congruent to each other. So you can imagine it like all the sides are equal to these small sides, and that's why it gets smushed in. Then we have a rectangle. A rectangle has all the properties of a parallelogram. So opposite sides are parallel. In addition, all the angles are congruent. And we know 360 divided by 4 is 90. So all four angles are 90 degrees. And opposite sides are congruent just like a parallelogram. So we'll notice with the rhombus, we keep the features of the angle where opposite angles are congruent. And with the rectangle, we keep the features of the sides where the opposite sides are congruent. But the rhombus has all sides congruent, and the rectangle has all angles congruent. Now, if you take a rhombus and a rectangle, and they were to get married and have a baby, and in other words, you were to put all their characteristics together, you would end up with a square. And so a square is both a type of rhombus as well as a type of rectangle because it meets all the characteristics of both. Plus, it has an additional characteristic of each. So this is a rhombus because all sides are congruent. This is a rectangle because all angles are congruent. You put all that together, you get a square. This is just another way to visualize what we just went over. It's a tree diagram to show you the relationship between all the different quadrilaterals, the main types. So we have a trapezoid and a parallelogram as our two main types of quadrilaterals. Underneath the parallelogram, we have the rhombus and the rectangle as our two main types of parallelograms, and then the square is both a rhombus as well as a rectangle. Now, underneath a trapezoid, we have what's called an isosceles trapezoid. An isosceles trapezoid is a trapezoid. It's a special type of trapezoid. And an isosceles trapezoid is just a regular trapezoid, a typical trapezoid. However, it has some special features. So the two sides that are not congruent to, or that are not parallel to each other are called legs. So the parallel sides are AC and BD. So we see that in this picture. The congruent sides are, the parallel sides are AC and BD. The sides that are not parallel to each other are called legs. So AB and CD are referred to as legs. In an isosceles trapezoid, legs are congruent to each other. The other thing is the bottom two angles are congruent to each other, and the top two angles are congruent to each other. So angle A is congruent to angle C, and angle B is congruent to angle D. So we know an isosceles trapezoid is a trapezoid with congruent legs and two pairs of congruent angles. A diagonal is a segment that crosses a polygon joining opposite vertices. You'll see a lot of word problems with the word diagonal in them, so you just need to know what they are. So for example here, a line segment AD is a diagonal and line segment BC is a diagonal. You don't really know any properties about them right now. You will learn properties about diagonals later on. I just want you to know what they are for now. So to recap, parallelograms have two pair of parallel sides. Opposite sides are congruent and opposite angles are congruent. There are three types of parallelograms. The first two main types are rhombus and rectangle, and then there's a type of rhombus that's also a type of rectangle, and that's called a square. We also have our trapezoid, and the specific type of trapezoid we learned about was the isosceles trapezoid. So you need to know the features of a trapezoid, which is just that has one pair of opposite sides parallel, and then the isosceles trapezoid, which has congruent legs, bottom angles congruent to each other, and top angles congruent to each other. This is just an isosceles trapezoid, however. You can have all kinds of other trapezoids. As long as you have one pair of sides that's parallel, you have a trapezoid, if it's a four-sided figure.